The press conference room was packed. Journalists filled every seat, their notepads open, cameras rolling and microphones stretched forward. The air buzzed with tension as Karoline Leavitt took questions one by one, her voice steady and confident. She had done this before, handled tough questions, faced difficult crowds. But today, something felt different. Then, it happened. A voice cut through the noise, sharp and demanding. "Take it off." Silence. The room, once filled with murmurs and shifting bodies, now stood frozen. Journalists turned their heads toward the source of the voice. A well-known liberal TV host leaned forward in his chair, eyes locked on Karoline's necklace. The small pendant rested against her collarbone, a simple but powerful symbol of her faith. He wasn't making a request. He was issuing a challenge. Karoline met his gaze, her expression unreadable. She didn't flinch, didn't move. The host smirked, mistaking her silence for hesitation. "I said take it off," he repeated, louder this time. His voice carried an edge, a tone meant to intimidate, to make her feel small in front of the world. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Even those who often sided with the host seemed unsure about his demand. This wasn't a debate about policy or politics. This was personal. This was an attack on something deeper. Karoline's fingers lightly brushed against the necklace, but she didn't unclasp it. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her lips curving into the faintest smile. A smile that wasn't of amusement, but of understanding. She knew exactly what was happening. Slowly, she leaned toward the microphone. The cameras zoomed in. The audience held their breath, waiting for her response. "You want me to take it off?" she asked, her voice calm, almost amused. The host nodded, arms crossed, confident that she would either submit or explode. Either way, he thought he had won. But Karoline didn't submit. She didn't explode. She did something far more powerful. She took a deep breath, looked the host straight in the eyes, and spoke words that would leave the entire room speechless. "My faith is not a piece of jewelry." A ripple went through the audience. The host's smirk faltered for just a second. But Karoline wasn't done. She leaned forward slightly, her voice unwavering. "Is that what you're asking me to do? Remove my faith, my beliefs, my strength?" The cameras caught every movement, every flicker of emotion. The host opened his mouth, but no words came out. He hadn't expected this. He had expected outrage, defensiveness, something he could twist and use against her. But instead she had turned the question back on him. The room was dead silent, everyone waiting for what would come next. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, Karoline added one final line. One that would shift the power of this conversation entirely. "Because if that's what you're asking, then I have only one answer for you." The room was frozen. Every camera lens, every pair of eyes, every breath was locked onto one person. Karoline Leavitt. The liberal TV host sat across from her, waiting, expecting hesitation, fear, or maybe even anger. Instead, she remained calm, her fingers resting lightly on the small necklace he had demanded she remove. "Because if that's what you're asking," she had said, "then I have only one answer for you." A pause. The silence stretched, heavy, and unbreakable. The audience, the journalists, even the host himself, no one dared to move. Then finally she spoke. "No." One word. Strong, final, unshaken. The host blinked. His smirk was gone now, replaced by something else. Confusion. Frustration? Maybe both. He had expected an argument, a fiery response, something he could twist and turn against her. Instead, she had given him control over nothing. Still, he wasn't ready to let it go. He leaned forward, his voice sharp. "So you're refusing. You're choosing a piece of jewelry over this conversation, over an open dialogue." Karoline tilted her head slightly, studying him. Then, with the same unwavering calm, she responded, "You call this an open dialogue?" A murmur rippled through the room. The cameras zoomed in. The audience shifted. The host opened his mouth to speak, but Karoline wasn't done. "You didn't ask me a question. You gave me an order." Another pause. "You didn't want a conversation. You wanted compliance." The room was no longer on the host's side. The energy had shifted. He had started this battle with confidence, expecting her to crumble. But now it was clear. She wasn't playing his game. He laughed, a nervous chuckle, trying to regain control. "Come on, Karoline. It's just a necklace. Are you really going to make this about something bigger?" She didn't blink. "I'm not the one who made it bigger. You did." The host's face twitched. He knew this was slipping away. He needed to regain power, to turn the crowd back in his favor. He tried again. "You're overreacting. It's just a symbol, right? It doesn't change who you are." Karoline's expression remained steady. "Then why does it bother you so much?" Boom. The words landed like a thunderclap. The room held its breath. The host had no answer. He shifted in his seat, searching for something, anything, to regain control. But it was too late. Karoline had already won. She leaned back, her confidence unshaken, her faith unbroken. And for the first time that day, the host had nothing left to say. The liberal TV host shifted in his seat. His confidence, once unshakable, was now cracking. The silence in the room was unbearable. He had expected an easy victory, a moment to humiliate Karoline Leavitt on live television. Instead, he was now the one under pressure. Karoline sat calm, her fingers lightly brushing the necklace he had demanded she remove. The cameras zoomed in on her face. She was composed, unwavering. The host cleared his throat, forcing a chuckle. "All right, Karoline, let's be honest. This isn't about faith, is it? It's about making a statement, about playing the victim." Karoline didn't flinch. She studied him for a moment, then responded, clear, direct, and unwavering. "Is that what you think?" The host smirked. He thought he had her now. "That's what I know." Karoline tilted her head slightly. "Then tell me, who made this an issue? Was it me, or was it you?" The host's smirk faltered. He hesitated just for a second, but the audience caught it. The energy in the room shifted once again. "You're the one who brought it up," Karoline continued. "You're the one who made it about something bigger. You're the one who turned a simple act of faith into a controversy." The host opened his mouth, but she wasn't finished. "So let's be clear. This isn't about me making a statement. It's about you trying to erase one." The tension in the room tightened. The audience wasn't just watching anymore. They were listening. For the first time, the host looked uncomfortable. His carefully rehearsed confidence was slipping. He needed to regain control. Fast. He leaned forward. "Look, Karoline, I'm just saying that public figures like you, public figures like me," Karoline interrupted, "or people who believe in something you don't." Boom. Another hit, another shift in the air. The host exhaled sharply, forcing a smile. "All right, let's move on." "No, let's not." Dead silence. "Because this moment matters," Karoline said, her voice steady. "Not for me, but for every person watching. For every person who's been told to hide who they are. For every person who's been made to feel that their faith, their beliefs, their voice should be silenced." The audience was glued to their screens. Even those who disagreed with her couldn't look away. The host glanced at his notes, desperate for a way out. "Well, Karoline, it's just a necklace, right?" She finished for him. "Then why are we still talking about it?" Another silence. The host had no answer. Karoline smiled, just slightly. Then she leaned back in her chair, her point made, her faith unshaken. The silence was suffocating. Karoline sat still, her expression unreadable, while the liberal TV host struggled to regain control of the conversation. He had expected her to back down, to fumble, to look weak under pressure. Instead, she was calm, too calm. The audience could feel it. The host exhaled sharply, flipping through his notes. He needed a way to turn this around. His authority was slipping, and he knew it. "Karoline," he began, forcing a smirk. "No one's saying you can't believe in whatever you want. But let's be honest. You wear that necklace because you want attention. You want to make yourself a victim." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Some nodded in agreement. Others sat stiffly, waiting for Karoline's response. She didn't react immediately. She simply watched him, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. Then she tilted her head slightly and spoke softly, but with an edge that cut through the noise. "So, my faith is a publicity stunt." The host's smirk widened. He thought he had her now. "I mean, let's not pretend otherwise. You knew wearing that necklace would get a reaction." Karoline nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right." The host blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, what?" "I knew it would get a reaction," she repeated. "Not because of me, but because of people like you." The smirk vanished. The room was dead silent. Karoline leaned forward slightly. "You see, my faith doesn't make me a victim. It makes me strong. It gives me purpose. And the fact that you think standing by my beliefs is attention-seeking says more about you than it does about me." Boom. The audience was locked in. Even those who disagreed with her couldn't look away. The host's face darkened. "Oh, come on, Karoline. Let's not act like this is some great act of courage. It's just jewelry." Karoline didn't hesitate. "Then why do you care so much?" The host froze. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. "You're the one making a big deal out of it," Karoline continued. "You're the one demanding I take it off. If it's just jewelry, then why are we still talking about it?" The host clenched his jaw. He had no response. Karoline leaned back in her chair, watching him struggle. "The truth is, you don't want me to take off a necklace. You want me to take off my faith, my values, my identity. And that," she smiled slightly, "is never going to happen." The room was electric. The audience knew they had just witnessed something powerful. The host knew he had lost control. And Karoline, she knew she had made her point. But the showdown wasn't over yet. Because what happened next, no one saw coming. The tension in the studio was unbearable. Karoline's words had landed like a thunderclap, leaving the host scrambling for a response. The audience sat frozen, their eyes darting between the two. Even the camera crew seemed hesitant to move, afraid to break the moment. The host's face twitched. He knew he had lost ground, but he wasn't done yet. He leaned forward, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Okay, Karoline," he said, his voice measured but sharp. "You want to play the martyr, fine. But let's be real. You're just using your faith to push an agenda. People like you pretend to be oppressed when, in reality, you want special treatment." A murmur rippled through the audience. Some nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. Karoline exhaled, her expression unreadable. Then she tilted her head slightly, as if studying him. "Special treatment," she repeated. The host smirked, thinking he had her. "That's right. You want to be seen as brave. You want people to feel sorry for you." Karoline nodded slowly, as if considering his words. Then she did something no one expected. She reached for the microphone, adjusting it slightly. The movement was small, but it commanded attention. And when she spoke, her voice was lower, calm, deliberate, but laced with something sharp. "Tell me something," she said. "If I had taken it off the moment you told me to, would you have called me brave then?" The host opened his mouth, but hesitated. "If I had given in, if I had done exactly what you wanted, would you have praised me? Would you have called me strong?" Silence. "No," Karoline answered for him. You would have smiled, nodded, and moved on, because it wouldn't have mattered to you at all. The only reason this is a discussion is because I refused. The host blinked. Karoline leaned forward slightly. You don't want equality. You want silence. You don't want me to have the same rights as you. You want me to hide them so you don't have to see them. A sharp intake of breath came from the audience. Even those who had agreed with the host before were suddenly shifting uncomfortably. The host forced out a laugh, but it sounded hollow. Oh, come on, Karoline. No one is silencing you. You're on my show right now, aren't you? Karoline smiled, just slightly. And yet, the first thing you said to me was an order. The room went still. The host's smirk faltered. He tried to speak, but Karoline wasn't finished. You asked me to remove something that represents my faith, something that means everything to me. And when I didn't, you called me dramatic, a victim, attention-seeking. But if it really didn't matter, you wouldn't have cared. If it really wasn't a big deal, we wouldn't be sitting here, having this conversation. She let her words sink in. The audience was hooked. Some people were nodding. Others looked conflicted. Even the camera crew seemed frozen. And then, just when it seemed like the conversation had reached its peak, Karoline reached for her necklace. The entire room inhaled. Was she going to take it off? Was she giving in? Or was this something else entirely? No one could have expected what happened next. The room was silent. All eyes were locked on Karoline as her fingers brushed against the chain of her necklace. The host sat back, his smirk returning, just barely. So, you're finally taking it off? He asked, his voice smug. Karoline didn't answer right away. She took her time, letting the tension build, making sure everyone was watching. And then, she lifted the necklace higher, letting the camera zoom in on it. A small cross, a symbol of her faith. You want me to take this off? She asked, her voice calm but cutting. Because it offends you? Because it makes you uncomfortable? The host's smirk twitched, just for a second. Karoline let the necklace rest against her chest again, her grip firm. Good. The room tensed. The audience inhaled sharply. Good? The host blinked, caught off guard. Excuse me. Karoline nodded. Good. I hope it does make you uncomfortable. Because faith should challenge people. Conviction should make people think. And if something as small as this, she gestured to her necklace, shakes you this much, then maybe the problem isn't me. The studio was dead silent. Even the audience members who had laughed at the host's jokes before were now uncertain. Some whispered to each other. Others just stared. The host shifted in his chair, his confidence slipping. I just think. Karoline cut him off. You think it's okay to mock people for their beliefs. You think it's okay to tell them what they can and can't wear. But if I had asked you to remove something that represents your beliefs, you would have called it an attack. The host's face darkened. That's not the same thing. Karoline tilted her head. Isn't it? A flicker of doubt crossed the host's expression. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, especially not on his own show. Karoline continued, her voice unwavering. You wanted me to feel ashamed, to back down. But here's the truth. You don't have that power over me. And you never will. The tension in the studio reached a breaking point. The host opened his mouth to respond, but Karoline wasn't done. She leaned in slightly, her gaze locked onto his. You asked me to take it off? She paused, letting the moment stretch. I choose to wear it, proudly. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, the host had nothing to say. And then something unexpected happened. Someone in the audience clapped. Then another. And another. The slow ripple of applause grew louder, spreading through the room. The host's jaw clenched, but he couldn't stop it. The audience had made up their minds. Karoline had won. But just when everyone thought the moment was over, the host's face twisted with frustration. His fingers clenched into fists. And then he did something no one saw coming. The applause echoed through the studio. The host's face was a mask of frustration. He had lost control. His own audience was clapping, not for him, but for her. He couldn't accept it. With a forced chuckle, he leaned forward. "All right, Karoline," he said, his voice tight. "Since you're so confident, let's really test your faith." The audience quieted. Something about his tone was different now. Sharper. Karoline remained composed, watching him carefully. The host reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, something that glinted under the studio lights. A pair of scissors. Gasps rippled through the room. The host held them up between his fingers and smirked. "If that necklace really doesn't matter, let me cut it off." For the first time, a flicker of disbelief crossed Karoline's face. Not fear, just sheer disbelief at how far he was willing to go. The audience was frozen. Some murmured in shock, others exchanged glances, waiting to see what would happen next. Would Karoline stop him? Would she give in? The host leaned closer, the scissors glinting between them. "What's the matter?" he taunted, afraid to lose it. Karoline exhaled slowly. Then she did something that no one, especially not the host, expected. She stood up. Without breaking eye contact, she took a step forward. Then another. And another. The studio held its breath. The host's smirk wavered. He hadn't expected her to move toward him. Karoline stopped just inches away. The camera zoomed in. Her voice was calm, controlled, powerful. "You think faith is something you can cut away?" she asked. The host blinked, caught off guard. She shook her head. "Faith isn't a necklace. It's not something you can rip off or destroy." The audience leaned in. Karoline's next words sent a chill through the room. "But if you want to try," she glanced at the scissors, "go ahead." A stunned silence. The host's hand trembled slightly. His cocky expression cracked. Karoline wasn't afraid. She wasn't backing down. The challenge he had set up, the public humiliation he had planned, had just backfired completely. His fingers tightened around the scissors. His jaw clenched. But in that moment, the truth was clear. He had already lost. The cameras captured it all, the hesitation, the crack in his confidence, the way the audience was no longer on his side. And then slowly, the host lowered the scissors. He tossed them onto the table with an awkward chuckle, trying to act like it was all just a joke. But nobody laughed. The damage was done. Karoline gave him one last look, not of anger, not of hatred, but of pure, unshakable strength. Then she turned to the audience, her voice steady. "You see, the thing about faith," she touched her necklace, "is that no one can take it from you." The room erupted. Thunderous applause. Some people stood. Others cheered. The moment was no longer about a debate. It was about conviction, dignity, and the power of belief. And the host. He sat there, defeated, as his own show became Karoline's greatest victory.